Today I'm joined by Orla in County Kildare, and Orla is one of our past clients who had carers from our service, and Orla has very kindly agreed to talk to me today about her experience of our live-in care service. So hello Orla.
Hi Tom, how are you?
Very well, and you?
Not so bad, thanks.
Great. So Orla, what led you in the first place to call ALHomecare?
I suppose for us, it happened during COVID, during the lockdown. Both my parents were elderly. My mother's health would have been poorly, and my dad had dementia. And Mam's health meant that she wasn't able to mind Dad by herself. And so we ended up quite a while back, I suppose, it was in August 2019, we ended up putting Dad into a nursing home, which was not an ideal scenario for anybody. My mother was devastated, but there was no other solution for us. And every now and then, in the 14 months Dad was in the nursing home, Mam would say, I wish Dad could come home. And we would always say, but there's no way we can do it. To employ a company would mean that it was really expensive. You're paying 3 8-hour care packages every single day, and it just wasn't financially viable. None of us lived near Mum and Dad. And one October weekend, I was down with my mother and she handed me a piece of paper and she said, this came through the doorway, Orla. What do you think? And it was the flyer for ALHomecare. And actually, it was the first time when I looked at a brochure that I realised that there was a possibility that we could take my dad home. Sorry, it's emotional because it was a really emotional time. So that's how we came across ALHomecare, and it just seemed like a solution that was possible. It was a solution that met our parents' needs, but also was financially viable. So it was going to work out at less or similar in cost to a nursing home for us. So that's how we got in touch with you.
What differences did you see that ALHomecare made to your relative's life and your family's life since hiring the carer?
It was absolutely remarkable because before this, for 14 months, my dad was in a nursing home. Before COVID, we would visit Dad. My mother visited Dad every single day, and he was not always responsive. She stayed 3 or 4 hours, and it was torture because with the best will in the world, a nursing home is not home. And my dad didn't like being there, even though he had dementia. He knew he wasn't at home and he wasn't comfortable at the start there. And then we found Dad just went in on himself and he was no longer the lovely daddy that he had always been. And it was heartbreaking for my mother. They were married a very long time. They were married for 65 years. So it absolutely transformed our lives. When lockdown came, Mam got 5-minute visits in a corridor in the nursing home, through no fault of the nursing home, Tom, obviously, but it was inhuman. And my mother faded away and was almost dead in her house on her own in Kildare, and we were visiting at weekends when we could. It was an awful existence, and it transformed our family. Dad arrived home at the end of November, and we actually employed 2 carers because Dad's care needs were not huge with his dementia, but my mother is very frail. And so Mam wasn't able to do any of the physical care for Dad. So we needed people to get Dad up in the morning and put him to bed at night, and sometimes to help him to eat and sometimes to help him go to the bathroom. So we had 2 carers living in, and it literally was life-changing because we got our dad back, you know.
What advice would you give to a family who are struggling right now with the care needs of an elderly relative?
I see it all the time. You know, I don't live in Kildare, so friends of mine locally to where I am in the country, I look and I see them struggling with the care for their mother. And even though they live in the locality, for us, that was a difficulty. There was nobody close by. But even for people who live close by, it's so difficult. And the solution of having somebody live in, it's financially incredibly manageable as an option because the person is getting their accommodation, the person is getting their food, and they're getting money. And the money is not bad money for them, but in terms of a family, the money is very manageable. And I think it is so much better a solution than a nursing home, because I don't think anybody would choose a nursing home as a first option for a parent. And for my dad, he came home and we were able to hug him, we were able to chat to him. My mother was able to sleep in the bed with him every night. They were back as a married couple again, where mum and dad had lost that for 14 months in the nursing home. And as a family member, that's really upsetting. I know I shouldn't be upset on the podcast, Tom, but actually, for other families, I have no doubt that it is an upsetting time for them. So I cannot say enough what a wonderful experience it was, and how fantastic it was in terms of the care of dad, and for my mother too, because it meant we knew mum was safe and we knew that there was somebody there all the time. And for me, working full time in another county, not able to be there, it meant I wasn't getting frantic phone calls on a Friday morning at 9 a.m. when I was on my way to work from my mother, who was 2 hours drive from me. And the peace of mind that that gave us as a family was wonderful.
It's fairly common that an elderly person may resist the idea of a live-in carer. Did you find that with your mother and your father?
Obviously, dad wasn't at home, so it wasn't a case of dad resisting. And by the time dad came home, he kind of wouldn't have noticed that there were new people in the house. My mother resisted the idea of having care in with her because it wasn't for her, it was for my dad, and she thought she could help him. The difficulty was she couldn't help him, but she wanted him home. And so there was resistance from my mother for care. However, when she looked at it and she realized that she got dad back, and that's literally what we did, we got our dad back, that made it all the easier. And I'm going to be honest and say it wasn't always an easy journey for my mother, because she's a proud woman, she's independent, she wanted to be doing things. And so with someone else who's living in the house, that can be difficult at times, but the advantages so outweigh the disadvantages. And my dad passed away last May, and we had him home for 5.5 months, and they were the best 5.5 months ever. And my mother was so happy, and her only comment when dad died was, we should have done it sooner. So for me, that tells me that yes, she resisted, but I mean, it was the best thing that we ever did, because it just gave them back a little bit of their independence. Yes, they had somebody living with them, but the carers are so lovely, and we were so lucky with our carers, and we didn't have a perfect fit at the start. And I have to say, you were very good, Tom. And I think that's the thing for families to know. It doesn't always work out perfectly at the start, but you were so helpful, and it did work out. And we ended up with 2 really lovely carers who were fantastic with mum and dad. And they had just the right amount of awareness that my mother needed her space. And so they gave her that. And that was really good. So I think when Mammy realised that they weren't going to be on top of her and minding her as well as looking after dad, it made it much easier. And they were just very sensitive to her needs as well as my dad's needs. And so anybody who's thinking of it, what I would say to you is, you know something, it is only a benefit if you are torn between bringing somebody into your parents' house or sending one of your parents to a nursing home. Please try bringing somebody to your parents' house, because it is so much more wonderful, and you still have your parent. And we were able to have dad at home, and he died in his own bed, and that was worth so much to us, rather than dying anonymously in a nursing home where I know they cared for him, but it isn't the same care. He wasn't with my mother when he was in there. We weren't able to visit him when he was in there. He ended up being at home, and we were able to call down. We helped the carers at the weekend. And it just meant that dad got back some of his dignity, and we felt like we got dad back too.
Well, Orla, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And I'm sure many families will get a lot of comfort and reassurance from what you've said, and that they will take advantage of this opportunity. As you say yourself, if a family had the choice, they would in most cases choose to have their relative at home rather than a nursing home. But a lot of families don't actually know about live-in care, and so they think there is no option.
Absolutely. And I have to be honest, Tom, as a child of adult parents who are now at the age where they need minding, it has changed my opinion about care for myself. And so it has changed my husband and my attitude to what will happen for us in the future, because it is something that we have decided already, that hopefully in the future, when it comes to it, that it is something that we will need or we will look for, that's the way we'll go. I really think that it is the absolute optimum solution, because it is financially accessible for people, and it is so much more human, and it's so much more normal for people to stay in their own homes with that extra bit of care and extra hours as and when they're needed. And so someone can live in with fewer hours at the start and longer hours at the end. We had people who had, longer hours sometimes, but then they had shorter hours at other times, because there were times when there were people home and, we didn't need as many hours from the girls. But it is a fantastic solution. So yeah, absolutely, I would say go for it. It's a great idea.
Thank you, Orla. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.